Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Local Review Body. I'm Sheila McLean, Governance Officer and Clerk to the LRB. We have no apologies, all the members are present. The first item of business is to appoint a chair. Could I ask the members present to nominate one from amongst yourselves to take the chair, please?
Could I nominate Councillor Benison?
No, I'll second Councillor Benison.
Okay, you happy to take the chair, Councillor Benison?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'll hand the meeting over to you. Thank you.
Can I ask that members put their hands up when they want to speak? If officers can give their name and their job title before they give a response, and can ask that the clerk takes the roll call, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Benison.
Yes, I will.
Councillor Graham Houston.
Yes, present.
And Councillor Alistair Majuri.
Present.
Thank you. It's just to advise all that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast live on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to the item 3 on the agenda, declarations of interest.
I have none.
None. No.
Okay. Item 4 is the application for review, planning number 2100262 FUL, and I understand that Richard Callender is going to speak to that report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Just for the record, I'm Richard Callender, Planning Advisor to the Local Review Body. For each case, I'll give a short presentation on the contents of the agenda papers, and also a PowerPoint presentation which will show the site plans and site photographs. In relation to agenda item 4, it's Atherstone Planning and Architectural Design Limited. On behalf of Mrs Lesley Gordon, are seeking a review of a delegated decision to refuse planning permission. As mentioned by the Chairs, is planning application reference 2100262 full. 2 dwelling houses on the garden ground at 2 Sauchenford Holdings at Snabhead Road, East Plean, refused under delegated powers on 22nd of June 2021. With reference to the agenda papers, the application for review and review statement, supporting documents pages 1 to 12, decision notice, application plans and report of handling, pages 13 to 22. Council's reasons for refusal in summary are that the proposal fails to comply with Policy 1.1, site design, and Policy 2.10, housing in the countryside of the local development plan. It fails to respect the predominant development pattern and will result in the first circumstance of backland development in the area. Second reason, it's not a design and finish that would be expected in the countryside due to inappropriate boundary treatment and finishing materials. Third reason, fails to comply with Primary Policy 5 of the local development plan, as no flood risk assessment has been submitted and the flood risk impact is therefore unknown. Fourth reason, proposal cannot be accessed safely and result in unacceptable impact on road safety. Just to give a wee bit of context for this, I'll just share a PowerPoint presentation for this particular proposal. Can I just check that's come up on the screen for members to see?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. So, say 2 dwellings garden down at 2 Sauchenford Holdings. Site location plan is included in the agenda papers, but comprises of a group of small holding properties. I think to date maybe from between the First World War and Second World War, gradually been kind of developed and progressively sort of extended over the years. Application site, I can maybe just beg your pardon. Zoom in, this is down here. So this land outlined in red on this card here, and the application property is this house in here. Just a little bit of context to the more wider location for members who might not be familiar with the locality. It's on the old A9 that links Bannockburn to Plean. Plean just come into view here. Cowie is up in this kind of top right hand corner, and a group of buildings is accessed from the A9 via I think a private road that links through here, and you can return back onto the A9 this way. And I see a group of houses variously extended, altered, added to over the years. Proposed site is within the sort of side garden area, curtilage of the property, the existing cottage marked here, and the two houses as proposed sit one behind the other in relation to the view of land here. Sort of all this kind of hatched and green there with the brown driveway and the two houses shown in this plan. House design, single story bungalow, 3 bedrooms I think, yes, and a kitchen and lounge area. Finished materials are smooth concrete roof tiles, white render and UVPC windows and rainwater goods. Similar design for the second house. One aspect of the proposal does lie within an area that's identified as medium to high risk of flooding. This plan shows that area based on Scottish Environmental Protection Agency mapping. The star is the rough location of this plot itself there, just indicating where that is. The views of the locality, this is looking south from Snabhead Road onto the site. The application house is here, an existing building which will be demolished to make way for one of the properties. New houses, as I say, is here. A more oblique view looking southeast. The application house here, the building, and you're starting to get views of number 1 Snabhead Road, which is to the east of the house. View from the field to the back, so the existing house here, the existing buildings have been removed, and it's right in an area that's used, I think, for some sort of dressage horse training in here that will be taken over by the house plots. More oblique view showing the main house here, the existing building, the house behind it on Snabhead Road itself, and another view showing the houses again, the plot in here, and number 1 Snabhead Road. There's actually 2 properties within that curtilage. A view across, looking down the rear boundary of the site towards the west here. And a couple of views of the sort of general street scene on Snabhead Road itself shown here. End that presentation. Returning to the agenda papers, representations from the road service, pages 23 to 4, representations from 3 local residents and petrol ionic areas, I should say, have pipeline interest in the locality 25 to 30. Further representations submitted in response to the application for local review, pages 31 to 36. Draft planning conditions in the event the review is upheld, and relevant development plan policies, pages 37 to 42, against which the application for review has to be considered, and these are site planning, housing in the countryside, and supplementary guising, housing in the countryside and support design guide. These include definitions, interpretations of policy wording relevant to this review. In summary, the development houses would be supported if they are closely and cohesively visually related to an existing group, only where the scale, layout and design is suitable for their intended location. And primary policy 5, flood risk management. With reference to the review statement, sets out a case in relation to each reason for refusal. It's believed the pattern of development can be compliant with the local development plan policy 210, relating to existing building groups and clusters of infill development. With reference to mapping and aerial photography, it's considered allowing housing development in the site will not be inconsistent with the existing pattern of development. Secondly, although generally dwellings lie to the road side of the small holding properties, they are not laid out in a uniform pattern, orientation or distance from the roadside. There's also extensive associated buildings, including to the rear and side of dwellings. There's, however, acknowledged a previous application at 23 Suffolk Holdings refused planning permission. Thirdly, the application site does not directly front onto Snabhead Road East. It lies in a gap between 2 Sauchenford Holdings and one Sauchenford Holdings, which lies further to the east, and where 2 residential properties can be found. Design and finishing is considered to be acceptable, and in saying that, the applicant is agreeable to amending design details and finishing to address concerns raised by means of suitably worded planning condition. relation to flood risk assessment, the applicant wishes to resolve this situation with either a condition requiring a flood risk assessment or that consideration of the application deferred to allow time for presentation of a flood risk assessment. I wish to advise the LRB that on this point, if the LRB is minded to approve the review, then a final decision must be deferred to allow for the preparation of an FRA flood risk assessment, and the flood risk assessment should then be subject to formal consultation with SEPA under current consultation arrangements. So it's not possible to condition a flood risk assessment. In relation to road safety it's considered that there will be a small increase in traffic and that won't have a material effect on road safety. A site visit has been requested to allow members a full appreciation of the characteristics of the proposal in the context of the holdings. End of presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. First of all, I wanted to check with members on page 4 of the agenda. The applicant has indicated that they would like a site inspection. Are we happy to proceed with this application without a site inspection? Councillor Houston.
I'm quite happy to proceed. I don't feel I need a site inspection. I think it's fairly straightforward as to its situation and from the presentation that's been provided by the officer.
Thank you. Councillor Majeri.
Yes, I'm the same. I'm happy to proceed without a site visit.
Thank you. I'm also happy to proceed without a site inspection. I think there's enough photographs provided by the officers and the applicant to come to a decision. Do the members feel that we need any further information in writing?
Not for me, thank you.
Not for me.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we're happy to proceed. I wanted to ask to Richard, and I do know the area well because it's within my ward. And I know that the area is very prone to flooding. Did the applicant or the agent give any reason why a flood risk assessment wasn't provided, and was one asked for by the officers?
Yes, from the context of the review submission, one was asked for and wasn't received. And that's acknowledged in the review statement. I haven't got to the exact answer, but sometimes if an application is unacceptable for other planning reasons, there's no point maybe asking for a flood risk assessment that would incur considerable cost, and at the end of the day the application is going to be refused for reasons that are not relating to the flood risk. So a request was put in, it wasn't responded to or submitted, but it looked like the case officer taking the view the application was going to be refused anyway. So you don't normally pursue particularly technical reports, which can be quite an expensive undertaking, where there's other sound reasons for in the view of the case officer for the application to be refused. However, that's noted in the review statement, and as I said, the applicant is agreeable to proceed with a flood risk assessment if required. Thank you.
Thank you. I did note in the applicant's appeal that they had stated that a flood risk assessment had not been asked for because of a single story extension, sorry. And so they, from the reading of that, I got the impression that they were justified in not replying to the flood risk assessment request. But I do note that this is for two 3-bedroom houses. It's not a single story extensions, and I think that two 3-bed houses would cause a considerable impact on the already risk to flood the area rather than just a single story extension. I wanted to raise the...
I did check the position with Scottish Environment Protection Agency, and that's the appropriate course of action that they would have to legally obliged to be consulted on a flood risk assessment, where its extensions are a bit more discretionary, but certainly for dwelling houses, and they've got what's called a vulnerability categories, and dwelling houses are considered to be vulnerable developments, and therefore a flood risk assessment is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about the roads safety. Excuse me. On page 11, the applicant has said the transportation development team leader included in their response there's been a number of junction improvements, but I also note that on page 23, the transport officer has also said that's on the second last paragraph, speed and regular turning of traffic is likely to result in accidents with serious consequences. So I think they've been a bit picky about what parts of the response from transport services that they've chosen to quote. I don't know if you're able to answer any questions on the road safety aspect, Richard, but can you give us some more information about the road response on page 23?
It's really just a consideration that has informed the decision to refuse planning permission for the reasons given in the response, and the nature of the relationship of these access. A kind of straight stretch, as is highlighted in the response, an area or a stretch of road, maybe the first opportunity to overtake. And it's really using the professional judgment of the roads engineer to really come to the conclusion that particularly right-hand turns in from the road is likely to increase potential for accidents, quite serious accidents, given the vehicle speeds on the road at 60 mph restricted road. So that's the advice that the roads engineer has provided based on their understanding of road safety and local as well. So, and it's a consideration as to whether number of existing vehicle movements, if the movements associated with two additional houses result in a significant change to road safety. I have to say it tends to be an incremental issue. It's not maybe just, there's been a history of development here for many years. The access has been approved, but equally traffic volumes, traffic speeds change as well. So that's the view that's been taken by the roads officer, the senior development control officer from the road service on it.
Thanks, Richard. Are there any questions from members? Councillor Houston.
Yes, just on the roads. I mean, I read what Mr. Perry had to say, and it's a long straight road. I get that, but of course, you know, it's coming into a 90-degree turn, so the speed of traffic must really, you have to slow down to do that kind of manoeuvre. Coming down, as I say, Snabhead Road East down to the junction. I appreciate a right turn coming from there would be one, but it's interesting that over the years there has been increased development along the road, and it's an increasing concern that they have. I don't know if it's fair to ask Richard about a view of our control officer in roads and traffic, but what weight I think do I need to put on this about saying it's because it's a long straight road and affords opportunity for overtaking? I agree, but when it comes to a 90-degree turn, traffic must be commensurately much slower. Am I wrong in that?
I think the issue is the long straight stretch is the A9 rather than the Snabhead road itself. So it's vehicles that have to turn in, enter and leave it's all to do with the conflict that arises at any junction, and it's traffic trying to pull out, traffic trying to pull in, traffic pulling out from Snabhead Road onto the A9 and either turning left or right, and traffic turning into from the A9 into the Snabhead Road. And bear in mind there is two junctions, or this more than likely. This particular development would be accessed from the one directly to the north. I did drive it a few days ago, and it's a more convoluted route round, so you'd be looking at maybe there's an alternative in and out, but the main one I think for this property would be the one immediately to the north. And it's really the conflict and the speed of vehicles and overtaking manoeuvres likely to take place, and potential conflict, and which really effectively is accidents that might happen with vehicles kind of crossing the paths of one another. It's the same logic at any junction, and the issue really is the number of vehicles coming and going on the existing access from the development area onto the classified road, and the speed of the traffic, and sort of the general, what's called the general geometry of the road as well. But they say it's really the professional view of the roads engineer that has been given, highlighting the road safety concerns as set out in the consultation response.
Could I follow with another question to Richard? Yes. The reasons for refusal, particularly point 2, was a failure to comply with policy 210, about as the proposed development is not of a design and finish that would be expected in the countryside due to inappropriate boundary treatment and finishing materials. Now, I know that the applicant has said that they're prepared to engage with the council and do that. Has that changed of what we've seen? Because we've seen the for 2 bungalows, white render, etc., which seems appropriate for the countryside. What is it in that decision that was so contrary to 210?
Again, it's really the context is taken to a certain extent from what's around about the property, not just in this case anywhere. So if there's a high proportion of, say, natural slate, maybe natural stone in the buildings, that would provide the context for any new development. So the context would really be taken from the mix of materials that's already on buildings in the locality. They do tend to have a kind of white render, and I have to say there's also evidence of modern tiling being used. Maybe the original buildings were slated, and I think there's 1 or 2 of the original properties still have that finish. Your preference really is to maybe revert to what would have seemed to be traditional and even vernacular, I suppose, at the time the development was taken. Originally laid out as small holdings, and that would have been slate and maybe a kind of render. I think the main contention here is possibly the use of smooth concrete tiles, but perhaps a slate or even a slate substitute might be more in keeping with a rural setting for properties. Concrete tiles in general tend to be more for kind of suburban locations, built up area locations.
Thank you.
Councillor Majuri, do you have any questions?
No, and it's been my primary concerns are around the road and the flooding element, which has been covered.
Thank you. I wanted to ask just one last question, Richard, about the, I noticed on page 20, this has been called a stacked development, rather than a housing and a garden ground. Can you tell us what the differences are between the two, please?
Yeah, it's primarily once you go beyond the built-up area, the housing and countryside policy applies by definition, whereas there's separate guidance about housing and garden grounds, which applies to the built-up. So you always get 2 sets of, well, not you always, you have got 2 sets of guidance relating to new houses. One is when they're in the countryside, and that's when the housing and countryside guidance applies, and any other situation which by definition will be within the built-up area. There's separate sort of guidance that looks at impact on the character and appearance of the immediate locality. I'm thinking like this subdivision of large garden grounds, maybe within some of the older residential areas of Stirling or Plean or Village of Allen, and that again comes up fairly regularly as well, but that's considered under separate guidance. It's definitely housing in the countryside guidance that applies to the consideration of this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Are there any further questions? No. Shall we move towards making a decision? We're happy to do that.
Yeah.
Councillor Majuri, do you want to go first? Thank you.
Yes, yeah, on the balance of information provided, I would uphold the refusal of the
Sorry,
planning
Councillor
permission.
Majuri, would you be able to put your camera on?
Oh, sorry.
Okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, on the balance of information provided, I would uphold the refusal of the planning permission, primarily for the points 1, 3 and 4 stated on the refusal of planning permission. As to the design and finish, I don't think it's particularly contrary, but yeah, it's still refuse planning permission. Uphold refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Houston, do you want to go next?
Yep, thank you. I too would uphold the refusal. I think over the years the policy which applies 1.1 and 2.10, the local development plan, has been changing, but I don't think the matters considered by a local review body are ones to change policy. I think policy should be reviewed by the council as a whole and taken into account at the appropriate time, which may be during the course of the next forthcoming 5 years. I think it's important that we take cognizance of the existing policy and make decisions based on the existing policy as well. I think there is also a concern around flooding that needs to be addressed, and I think we also take note of the increased traffic movements at the junction of the A9 as well, and the potential danger that increased traffic draws to that. So I would, on this occasion, uphold the decision of the planning officer. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm also going to uphold refusal of this planning application for the reasons given, particularly regarding the flood risk and there being no flood risk assessment taken for these properties. There is flooding that happens in this area, and that's something that needs to be addressed, and the agent should have supplied a flood risk assessment. I'm also wanting to refuse it for the reasons given for the road safety. I think the professional opinion of the road safety officer should be taken into consideration. They've raised serious concerns about the increase in traffic on this road, and I think the design of the housing itself needs to be considered as well. So I'm also upholding refusal. So that's the decision of the panel. Did the clerk get the reasons? Okay.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's all noted. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to item number 5. The 12 Southburn Road, Blanefield, 2100674 FUL. And Richard, I think you were going to speak to this paper as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. As per our previous presentation, I summarise the agenda papers and give a short kind of visual presentation, plans and photographs for your PowerPoint. CMM Architects, on behalf of Scot, Macleod and Faye Wylie, are seeking a review of a delegated decision to refuse planning permission. Reference number, as you said, Chair, 21-00674 full. Two-storey extension to rear and side of Dwellinghouse in the erection of decking. 12 Southburn Road, Blanefield. Refused under delegated powers on 28th September 2021. Reference to the agenda papers, the application for review statement, correspondence with the planning case officer and a design statement submitted in support of the planning application, pages 43 to 94. There has been identified, just for the information of the members, a slight error in the review submission at page 66 shows an aerial photograph but incorrectly identifies the location of the application property. However, elsewhere in the review submission, Appendix 2, for example, page 3, and in the planning application plans, the location is correctly identified, so it's not considered to be a material error. Application plans are pages 95 to 108. I'll just share the presentation I have for this particular review. If you just hold on, please. Excuse me, beg your pardon. Okay, just to check, the members can see the presentation, 12 Southburn Road, Blanefield.
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. Application plans show form part of the agenda papers, but including the presentation here. So it's a established residential area within Blanefield, just kind of a bit to the south of Stirling, apart from actually north of Glasgow now, and housing date from maybe the 1970s, early 80s. The application site and property is a two-storey semi-detached property, semi-detached at 12 Southburn Road. Application plans comprise of 3-bedroom semi-detached property, ground floor, living room, dining room, upper floor, 3 bedrooms. Existing elevations are shown here. I think there has been maybe a small extension built in the past to extend the lines to the front very slightly. Other than that, as originally built. Proposed extension comprises a 2-storey wraparound extension. Let's maybe zoom in a wee bit, show the dimensions. About 3.345 metres out from the back. More or less the width of the house, 5.6 metres almost it would be if you add on the thickness of the walls. This is the ground floor plan, so it provides additional sort of sitting room space downstairs, decking at the back, a single-storey garage, and sorry, 2 seconds. This shows the relationship of the extension to 10 and 14 neighbouring properties. And the upper floor, yeah, maybe just zoom in this, see that a wee bit better. Is for an extension to bedroom 3, a new bedroom, the bedroom 4, I think additional toilet, bathrooms with a shower space on the upper floor. And the design extension is a flat roofed structure to be finished in facing brick to match the brick used in the locality. Not necessarily this house, I think it tends to be a smooth render or a dry dash render. There is some brick detailing already in the property. The actual extension itself will be finished predominantly in facing brick. And the plans include some visual representations of how the extension would look against the property. Zoom in a wee bit of that, gives you an idea of the relationship of the extension to the existing house. And this is a view from the front as well, so it projects out from the side about maybe halfway down, you know, maybe 2/3 of the way down the driveway of the house. Right, photographs now, looking onto the site, south and southeast from Southburn Road. The application property is the one to the left here. Number 10 is a detached house on the right-hand side as you're looking on from Southburn Road. Looking north from the rear garden area, so this is the area that would be developed, maybe not as far as the existing kind of decking patchway at the back, maybe not quite as far as that kind of wrap round to the side of the house. View towards neighbouring property at 14 Southburn Road on the left-hand side, and number 10 on the right-hand side of the slide, and views of the street scene, just to give a general indication of the style of the houses, I say modern 1970s, early 80s properties. Turning to the agenda papers, the decision notice and report of handlings, pages 109 to 114. Council's reason for refusal is the proposal fails to comply with policies 1.1 and 2.12 of the local development plan and supplementary guidance 12 due to the height, scale, mass, materials and overall design, which will result in a detrimental impact on the character of the dwelling house and result in an adverse impact on the amenity provided for neighbouring properties. Representations from neighbour, 10. Southburn Road is pages 115 to 128. Confirmation planning officers, no further comments, nor proposes any conditions, pages 129 to 130. Further representations from the neighbour in response to review and response from the agent to these comments, additional comments, pages 131 to 136. Relevant development plan policies against which the application for review requires to be assessed, pages 137 to 138, as previously mentioned. These are policies 1.1 site planning, policies 2.12 residential alterations and extensions, and supporting supplementary guidance. Summary of the review statement, the applicant has decided to remodel the modern semi-detached house to address their housing needs. Current house is considered to be cramped, low ceilings, minimal space standards and inadequate sanitary provision. The young-growing family aspire to a more contemporary house which meets their needs. Aerial photographs confirm the number of current extended properties in the locality, which is very much determines its character. That's page 76 of the review submission. As with many others in the area, the extent of remodelling means it cannot be regarded as subordinate to the original, so it cannot comply with relevant principle house extension supplementary guidance. Level drop provides an opportunity to create a contemporary living space of crisp modern lines. Facade is generally concealed from view, and the extension will have minimal impact on Southburn Road. And the applicant believes that policy guides have been unnecessarily restrictive, and the criticism of the architecture highly subjective is the determination. With regard to potential overshadowing of the adjoining owners at 14 Southburn Road, they've confirmed their desire to extend the house to build their extension to the mutual boundary would suit them, hence they have raised no objection. No further procedures have been requested in the case of this review. Okay, end of presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. I wanted to ask, my first question, the applicant has given quite a few photographs of extensions within the street and within the area. The extension that they want to build is over timber one, and I can't see any timber extensions in any of the photographs. Is this the first timber extension in the street?
So just to advise, Councillors, actually going to be finished in facing brick rather than timber. The plans might appear timber, but it's actually confirmed that the walls will be multi-facing brick in a sort of red buff colour. So is this a facing brick finish rather than a?
Is that new information? Because in the papers it says that it's timber.
I picked that up from the application plans actually.
Where does it say that? Because I was of the understanding it was timber.
So I'll just get the drawings up.
Certainly based on the images in 107, it would appear to be brick faced, but I don't know if that's what we're basing on. Yeah.
I know I read all the papers. I was of the understanding it was timber. just trying to find. I'm just trying to find where it actually says it's brick.
Can I refer you to page 107 of the agenda papers? And the drawing is planning 2, and it's material and finishes listed as walls,
Right.
multi-facing brick, red buff, and multi can be maybe a sort of mix
So it's going to be a red brick finish. My apologies. I thought it was timber. So we'll not need to ask that question. My apologies. Next question. Right, sorry, can I ask if any other members has any other questions on this?
Yeah.
Councillor Madrid, sorry.
Yes, yes. So the number 10 neighbour mentions concern about lack of access from maintenance and potentially destroying, I guess, the bordering landscaping. Are those material planning considerations?
Well, it's very common to find extensions, semi-detached properties, maybe especially when they're coming out to the back, side extensions involving driveway width extensions to also come out to the mutual boundary, and both from a sort of construction point of view, it's impossible to build these without actually securing access from the neighbour's property, and long-term maintenance would also require access from the neighbour's property. The general advice that's given is that you should really ensure you've got the relevant legal right of access to the neighbour's property before you commence even applying for planning permission, for example, but it's not a determinant as to whether planning permission should be required or not. Just maybe more common sense that if your neighbour's not going to allow access, which they're imperfectly entitled to say so, then it's going to make it very difficult for that extension to be built where they're on very close to the mutual boundary. And say particularly for semi-detached properties, that's quite often the case. Or alternatively, if you're building to the side of a house where the driveway is at the moment, again, eventually you run up against the neighbour's boundary. And the point also, Councillor G, you made was about the existing hedging. Again, there's always an issue as to who might own that, who might be responsible for that. Potentially if it's built hard on the boundary and grown either side, mutually owned as well. So there's various legal considerations, but it's not a material consideration as to whether planning permission should be granted or not.
Okay, not material. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Houston, did you have any questions?
No, I'm quite content with what I've read and what I've heard.
Okay, thank you. Richard, I just wanted to ask one last question. Throughout the applicant's statement, they're of the understanding or of the impression that the planning officer has refused this just because he doesn't like the extension sort of thing. It's to do with personal opinion. And in the statement on page 112, the report of handling, it stated the appearance is of a heavy extension struggling to fit comfortably with the existing dwelling house. Would you say that was a professional opinion or is that personal opinion? And also the second sentence here regarding the flat roof extensions are discouraged. There's quite a number of flat roof extensions in that street. Can you tell me why they're being discouraged now? Because they are actually quite common. We see them on quite a number of properties.
In terms of whether it's a professional or a personal judgment, it's very much by definition a professional judgment. It just relates to design issues. there's always an element of subjectivity as to the kind of assessment of the quality of the design. So there's no sort of hard and fast rules in terms of design, so in terms of scale, design, finishing materials, etc. It's always an on balance, kind of weighing up all the different considerations. But that consideration is based on professional judgments and experience and an understanding of the site and the locality, and also based on the advice that's set out in the guidance that we do have, which anyone can read, so it gives an indication of the considerations that will be taken into account, in this case in relation to extending a house. And that's why we have the local development plan, we have the supplementary guidance. It sets out some sort of baseline criteria against which extensions will be assessed, albeit ultimately they tend to avoid kind of hard and fast rules, and each case has to be looked at on its own merits. The issue about flat roofed extensions, again, it can be progressively within these estates, sort of 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s estates, you find a whole range of extensions being built in terms of style and design, some of which would be unacceptable now, and some are just through realisation maybe that flat roofs are perhaps not the best thing to have in a west coast of Scotland climate, which is what we're dealing with here, and therefore the preference now is maybe to have pitched roofs on extensions. But it's all to do with the scale of it and how that extension, a flat roofed extension, relates to the existing house. And a single story flat roofed extension to a semi-detached house, say for a small utility room or a kitchen dining room, may still be provided with a flat roof. In fact, in a lot of cases, these don't require planning permission in the first place because they'll be classed as permitted development. But if you're going for something a bit bigger, then maybe flat roofs are perhaps not the most appropriate way to roof an extension, particularly if the context is a sort of 1970s standard house design with sort of pitched roofs throughout the estate. So yeah, you could look at all extensions and maybe try and get a timeline for them, but design changes, acceptability design changes, and the recommendation probably is more where you can provide a pitched roof for an extension rather than a flat roof, although it's always going to be slightly more expensive because of that, but probably cheaper in the long run to maintain.
Thank you. Are there excuse me, are there any other questions from members? No. Are we happy to go to a decision?
Yes, I'm happy.
Okay, Councillor Houston, do you want to go first this time?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, having read over quite the extensive paperwork that's been provided and listened carefully to what the officer's saying, I'm of a mind to grant or uphold the appeal. I don't agree with the Council's reasons for refusal on the basis of the height, the scale, mass, materials, overall design, etc. I think these are quite subjective, and when you look across the estate and the photos that are provided, there is a wide variety of designs which have been already passed. So although I understand it's very different, I've seen other decisions taken elsewhere in the council area where one scratches one head and think, how on earth did that get through planning? However, when I look at this and look at the design that's planned for this, I think it is different, but I don't think it sits badly in the on the site. It is a wraparound one with the only bit that you're seeing is from the roadway, and the rest of it is to the rear elevation of the property. So on that basis, I think that I would support the application and grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Majuri, do you want to go next?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, likewise, I wish to uphold the appeal for the same reasons that Councillor Houston have given and Bob's note. And I'm sympathetic with the concerns raised by the neighbour at number 10. And on balance, it'd be right to uphold the appeal from that and to allow a family to stay in Blanefield rather than having to possibly move elsewhere to a larger household.
Thank you. I'm going to uphold the appeal as well. Although I personally wouldn't have this extension in my house because I don't like it, but that's my personal opinion. But I can't see any planning reasons as to turn it down. I wanted to check, should there be any conditions attached to this as we're going to agree to it? Richard, could you answer that, please?
The main one, I think, would be just for details of the materials to be submitted. There's a standard condition that goes on, particularly for house extension proposals. I mean, certainly the house is currently finished in rough cast, so it's not, unless you want it to match the materials that's used on the existing house in terms of finishes. But they're proposing brick, so you have to sort of consider whether that's. There is brick in adjoining houses. I could maybe show the photographs again as detailing. It's predominantly render, but there is brick detailing. So bricks, I would suggest, not out of context, quality, but I think you would want to be sure that appropriate colour is chosen.
Yes, I would agree with that. But what do you think, Councillor Houston, Councillor Majuri? Councillor Houston. Councillor Houston, sorry.
Thank you. I think we should leave it as it is. This is a design that the architect has submitted, the applicant has agreed to, and it's different. But it's a subjective judgment about. I'm not in favour of necessarily having rows and rows of houses that all look the same, and let's put render on it and it'll blend it in, etc. That's an opinion. I think they're making a bit of a statement on it, and they like it, and I'm quite happy to let that go. Yes, there'll be a standard standard condition put on about materials, etc. But I wouldn't want to inhibit them in any way by insisting that they make it look similar to others. It's set back from the road. It's set sort of a third of the way up the house, so it's not predominantly right onto the edge of the front-facing edge of housing. So you'll see it in the gap as you pass. So it's not that predominant. I think that needs to be blended in. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Majuri.
Yeah, I would agree with Councillor Houston. And just for the standard planning condition of submitting materials and finishes, of that I think I'd be looking for more detail than they provided on page 107. But yeah, likewise, I wouldn't want that condition to imply that we're looking to change the submitted design or finish. But if it's standard to request additional detail on materials and finishes, then I'd be happy to include that condition.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll go with the majority of the panel then. So that should just be a standard condition about the detail of the render. Is that correct?
Thank you. Yeah,
okay. Can I check that that's planning reasons that we've given for passing, for approving this? Sorry.
Yes, and you discussed the design issues, and you've expressed your own judgment on the merits of these and concluded that on balance permission should be granted, having taken into account relevant considerations.
Okay, thank you. So the decision there is to uphold the appeal with a condition of the detail of render. We'll move on now to item number 6, land adjacent to east of Garden House, Blanefield, 21000469 FUL. And Richard, I think you're going to speak to this paper. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. In relation to this application for review, Jigsaw Planning on behalf of Mr. Andrew Napier, seeking review delegated decision to refuse planning permission, reference 21000469 full. Erection of dwelling house and garage building, land adjacent and east of the Garden House, Blanefield. Refused under delegated powers, 26th of October 2021. Reference to the agenda papers, application for review and review statement, pages 139 to 152. Decision notice and report of handling, pages 153 to 159. Reasons for refusal in summary are that the principle of the housing in the site does not accord with policy 210 and policy 15 and associated supplementary guidance. Housing in the countryside as a proposed house is not being built on the brownfield land part of the site. The proposals do not accord with LDP design and placemaking policies and guidance, as they do not complement existing immediate rural context and will result in a build which will dominate the site and the surroundings in terms of appearance, position, height, scale and massing, and insufficient information has been provided which demonstrates that vehicles can move freely and the necessary road conditions can be achieved. Planning application form, application plan supporting statement, pages 160 to 196. I'll just do a short presentation to give a bit of context for this information, if you just hold on, please. Okay, just to check, members, can you see the presentation? Could come up okay on the screen?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Property is in the designated countryside and indeed greenbelt to the sort of south-west of Strathblane, Blanefield. The Carbeth huts, if you know the area, part of them, a number of them are to the north of the site. This is the main Stockymuir Road running between Blanefield and Carbeth itself. To give a bit more context for that, there's an Ordnance Survey extract showing the relationship of the site to the B821 Stockymuir Road, and the application sites generally marked with a star on this plan. And you can see Carbeth huts, various kind of converted new build properties in the locality as well as the Carbeth huts across the road. Itself, application site shown in this drawing here, can maybe just zoom in on that a wee bit. So the properties, the application site, the access road from the main road is here. Then there's a separate access, or a junction with the main road rather here, serves a number of properties, and the access road runs off that access track, and the property will be situated to the north of that house design coming up. Detached house, 4 or 5 bedroom property, ground floor, public rooms, upper floor kind of bedrooms generally. House design comprises pitched roof property and some design details. Materials to be used will be natural stone, slate, etc., and render, typical of what we like to see in countryside locations. So photographs of the site itself. This is as you come into the site off the shared access track, and if I can just maybe show the cursor, the house will have to sit approximately to where the cursor is at the moment. A view looking north, showing the site and the existing redundant building. The site of the redundant building has consent for an existing house. It's actually a sequence of renewals over the years based on the conversion of that building, latterly recognition that the building is no longer capable of conversion, so principal house having been accepted, permission has been reviewed on that basis. Again, if you can zoom in, you can start to see some pegs on the site that show the general location of the house. These stakes identify the general position of the house. There'll be a garage built here where the existing redundant building is, and the main house will be built in this locality here. Another view of the site, looking back towards the access point and the redundant building. The pegs here, or the stakes rather, show the position, a close-up of the redundant building. This is where the garage was to be positioned. A view looking across the site from the north, northeast to southwest. Again, stakes here, an existing the other redundant building on site which has consent also to be redeveloped for a house. Close up of that building itself, and a view looking towards the garden house which overlooks the site to the west. Returning to the agenda papers, we've got a ground investigation report, page 197 to 259. Consultation response from the road service, page 260 to 261. This is a duplicated in page 305 and 306 as well. Tree survey report, 262 to 304. Consultation response from Stirling Council Environmental Services, page 307 to 308. Representations, pages 309 to 314. Written submissions from the application case officer in response to the application for review, pages 315 to 320. Further representations in response to the application for review, pages 321 and 324, and proposed conditions and reasons, pages 325 to 326, and response to interested parties' comments, pages 327 to 328. Relevant development plan policy against which the application for review must be assessed are primary policy 1 placemaking, policy 1.1 site planning, policy 1.5 greenbelts, policy 2.10 housing in the countryside and supporting supplementary guidance. SG includes definitions and interpretations of policy wording relevant to this review, and the LRB's attention is drawn to definitions of other brownfield land as set in paras 234 to 238 of this guidance. Key points being that brownfield sites are broadly defined as sites that have been previously developed, and it really is, this means they are occupied by redundant or underused buildings, or where land has been significantly degraded by a former activity. In this respect, expected brownfield land will have evidence of sustained former use and be in a condition such that it cannot easily or readily be returned to a more natural state. Key test of whether a site falls within the brownfield definition will be the applicants will be able to demonstrate that there will be a significant wider environmental and visual benefit to be had in developing the site for residential development, as opposed to retaining it in its current or tidied up state. In line with policy 210, states that support will be given to single houses in the Greenbelt for specific purposes. Support may be given under this category for the redevelopment of brownfield land for a single dwelling house. It should, however, be noted at this stage that previous houses were approved on the basis of restoring redundant buildings rather than redevelopment of brownfield land, which wasn't a criteria in the Greenbelt permitted prior to the adoption of the current guidance in May 2020. Summary of the review statement. Based on the bullet points in the review statement, the site has a well-established history of being suitable for residential development. Indeed, extant planning permission exists for 2 dwellings in the site. The site is entirely brownfield, given it forms part of land which to be Carbeth Quarry. There is evidence of the site, the former workings, and a phase 2 environmental report has confirmed this. Application proposes to replace 2 permitted houses with 1 house. The footprint of the approved house is 553.5 square metres, where the now proposed footprint is 263.9 square metres, equates to 48% of the extant approved footprint. Proposal accords with the relevant policies within the adopted local development plan, given the proposal sees the development of dwelling in brownfield land, which already benefits from 2 extant permissions. Design has been developed to reflect the surrounding area, a mixture of housing types in this area, and locally used materials. While the proposals for a larger house than previously proposed in the 2 extant permissions, the overall built development will be less impactful. Also, it's been confirmed the applicant has ownership of land with a red line boundary, has access to the Carbeth Cursory Tract. Further conditions are deemed to be acceptable to confirm that. A site visit has been requested to assist members to understand locations of extant permissions and current proposal. End of presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And as Richard just mentioned, the applicant has requested a site visit. Do members feel that a site visit is necessary?
I don't, Chair.
Councillor Houston?
I don't think so, but could I ask Richard just for clarification on one point? There seems to be some ambiguity in that. Is the whole site brownfield, considered brownfield?
I would say no. I've got to be careful not state a planning opinion here. I'm not here to provide the LRB with planning opinions, but based on the physical characteristics of the site and the site history, the large area identified in the application plan is a mixture of brownfield in terms of the previously redundant buildings. There's also a portion that has been previously occupied by the quarry, but from the historic mapping I looked at, I don't think the quarry covered the whole site. So a limited area of the site can be classed as brownfield, and that really relates to the redundant buildings which fall within that category, as I've mentioned already. Just to quote again the definition of brownfield. It can be from the Housing and Countryside Guidance, and it's in rural areas. This means sites that are occupied by redundant or underused buildings, or where the land has been significantly degraded by a form of activity. Now that's been applied to the sites of the two buildings which are shown in the photographs. There's also can be demonstrated that the site has been previously occupied by a quarry, not the whole site, I don't think, from the historic mapping. It's also got to be kept in mind, though, that there's got to be the condition of the site has to be such that it's been significantly degraded by the former activity and has not really been subject to natural restoration. And again, it's not just a matter of maybe looking at old maps and finding quarries and saying that's a brownfield site. It's also the current condition of the site. That's an important consideration, as well as to its brownfield status relative to the housing and the countryside criteria. But that's, I can certainly, that's a view based on the physical characteristics of the site and the site visit and information that's been provided. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think a site visit would necessarily add anything to my my knowledge on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is any further written information required? Are we able to decide this today? No?
Nothing from me, no.
Councillor Majeri, are you okay to proceed? Yeah? Councillor Majeri?
Oh, sorry, Chair.
That's okay. I was just checking if you need any further written information.
Oh, no, sorry, no further written information from me.
Thank you. We'll now go on to questions for the officer. I'm actually going to pick up on something that Councillor Houston had just mentioned there. Richard, it's my understanding that this piece of land already has two planning consents, and those consents were given because they were replacing redundant buildings, and it was consents for two houses, two one-storey houses. Is that correct?
Yes, it's actually been a sequence of renewals as well. I think one of the initial, I can double check, but certainly there's been three initial application date from 2014, and then it was renewed in 2017, and then 2020, which was quite a common thing to happen. Permissions granted, it's not necessarily implemented. There's a 3-year lifespan to apply a permission, so the options for the owner or the applicant to come back and renew the permission. And as I said, that was based on the restoration of the redundant buildings, which are shown in the photographs. At some point, though, I think partly down to the delay in implementation, the condition of the buildings deteriorated to a point which it meant it wasn't economical to restore the buildings, and a reasonable approach was taken that permission has been established for a house on the site or at both sites, and therefore a built property can be constructed. But the original justification for the house was on the basis of restoration of buildings.
And that was for 2 one-storey buildings, and those redundant buildings are regarded as being brownfield sites. Is that correct?
In terms of, as well, no, they were justified. If you've got to go back and look at the original housing and countryside guidance, and there was redundant buildings, they were justified in terms because this site's in the greenbelt, so there's much stricter controls over the criteria that would apply in greenbelt. And one of the criteria that was allowed was the restoration of redundant buildings. The development in brownfield land was not a criteria that applied within the greenbelt, applied elsewhere, but not in the greenbelt. And that changed with the new guidance coming in May 2020. So brownfield, it's only limited to one house. If a brownfield site's identified in the greenbelt, it's one house that can be put. So it's slightly complicated planning history. It's all documented in the reports of handling, some of which are included in the agenda papers. But that's the from what I can see from the site histories for the 2 separate reports that are discussed in the review submissions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So just to clarify, now they already have permission for 2 one-storey buildings on this site. So should we give consent today, there will be consent for 3 buildings on that site. Is that correct? Because this wouldn't, delete the other 2 planning consents. The 2 planning consents would still stand. Is that correct?
Well, one effectively, because the site of one of the consents, that's the redundant building within the applicant adjacent to the proposed house where the proposed garage will be built, that will be effectively nullified by this development if it was to give consent. So effectively you would end up with sort of undermining that permission, as it were, by granting a sort of substitute permission for it. So you could have the 2 houses getting built on that side of the access road, but the redundant building to the south still benefits from a planning permission, and that would be the legal position as per the 2020 approval as well. So
okay, thank you. I wanted to ask as well, on page 151, the applicant has said that the roads officers were not consulted on this application. Is there any reason why roads wouldn't be consulted on this application, because they are statutory consultees?
Just bear with me a second. The consultation response is page 260. Um, 260 to 261. So I've got detailed comments from the roads service, which would have been considered as part of the application. So, okay. So the road service has been consulted and they responded, and that should have been referenced in the report.
Okay, that's fine. Apologies, that was in the middle of all these papers out, trees and land. Sorry, does members have any questions? Councillor Houston.
Chair, just coming back to the existing permissions. In the appeal submission, it says the application proposes to replace the 2 permitted houses with 1 house. So when I read that, I take it that, notwithstanding that the garage is going on the top site, and the second site could still be developed, but when they say replace it, does that mean, I took that to read that what they were doing is withdrawing their 2 current applications and asking them to be set aside and replace it with this one house. Either is that, am I reading that correctly, or is it, if we decided to approve or uphold the appeal, could that be a condition that the existing submission, the one that's currently in place, should be withdrawn?
Certainly, I would agree it's clearly stated that the intention is only to build a single house, i.e. the one that's currently subject to the application. However, we do have a situation where there's a current planning permission, and that's a sort of legally competent permission that's been granted for the house. And they say that's 20-00212. And it's not simply the case you can just sort of do away with them through a planning condition. They actually have to be what's called revoked. There's a procedure by which you can sort of remove the rights conferred by a planning permission. There is a procedure for that to be done to ensure it's all sort of done above board, and there's actually no permission that applies to that site anymore. But it's quite a complicated process. In some occasions, I'm aware of that applicants can agree to voluntarily revoke planning permission, or that can be maybe arranged, defer permission till permission's revoked. But a sort of cold analysis of the situation is that if the review body agreed to grant permission here, you would still have an extant planning permission for a house on the other side, more or less opposite where the proposed house is getting built. And so effectively we would have 2 houses, potentially 2 houses on the site. Whether the applicant goes ahead and builds a house is still a discretionary thing, but legally that permission would remain in place until it's actually voluntarily revoked through a statutory process. I have to say I'm not really fully familiar with the process. I'm just aware that it's a possibility, but it's not something you could condition. It's quite a significant change to the planning status.
And so the full permission for 00012 granted in April 2020 would run until 2025. Is that correct? Is it 3 years or 5 years?
Yeah, I'd have to check the exact wording. I mean, certainly still a current. If it's referenced in the documentation.
Is there not a standard that you either have to renew it after 3 years or 5 years? I just can't recall.
Yes, it's now 3 years, I think, either for outline of planning permission in principle or full permissions, unless it's extended. I would have to check the exact wording of the actual decision on that particular property. As you say, a full application.
Yeah.
But the fact that it was renewed after 3 years and the first time round suggests it's only a 3-year validity to the permission.
So it may only have 1 year to run.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Majuri, do you have any questions?
No, Chair. Thanks. I think Councillor Houston's question was addressed. just my point, my concern.
Thank you. Richard, I wanted to ask you a question on page 318. Number 2, it's about the design is not considered appropriate to the immediate surroundings in terms of appearance, position, height, scale and massing. I'm of the understanding that it's because it's the countryside and it's not regarded as being in keeping with the a house in the countryside. It would be more appropriate for an urban context. Could you give us a bit more detail about a house in the countryside that would be acceptable, and also considering that the sites have planning consents for 1-storey, is it 1-storey buildings that would be acceptable in this area?
Again, the design guidance that supports the housing in the countryside policy runs about sort of 40 odd pages, so there's actually quite a lot of different considerations in there in terms of the house styles. It's always to do just with the context as well, what's round about the immediate area, so it's hard to sort of say 2 stories fine in one place and 1 story is fine here. It's very much a kind of judgment call, as we've already discussed in relation to the earlier applications, and not necessarily wholly subjective, but if you're coming to a conclusion on the design merits of any proposal, you have to be able to sort of support that in terms of reference to current approved guidance for any council that operates in relation to that particular type of development, and also say the surrounding context there. Case officers take the view that the significant concerns in terms of scale design of it. It's really up to the review body to make that sort of separate judgment. I really can't kind of give you specific advice as to whether that's relevant to this particular case, but they're all kind of relevant considerations as to whether overall design is acceptable, like scale, design, location, external materials, and impact on surrounding locality and impact on neighbouring properties as well.
Thank you.
So I think any more specific than that, I'll have to give a general.
No, that's okay. That's fine, Richard. Thank you. Councillor Houston.
I wonder if Richard could go back to the presentation he gave us, just to give us an idea of the site, because when I looked at that and looked at the site layout, it seemed to me that the house was kind of sitting into the topography of the land. It wasn't sitting on top of it. Could we refer back to some of the images of the sites that you provided?
Can do, just bear with me. I'll share the presentation again. Thank you. Yeah. That's a kind of long view of the site looking south to north. So just to give you a context, that's the building that will be replaced with the garage, and that's the. I'll zoom in again. I think it helps to see a bit closer to hand. So the stakes here mark the general position of the house. There is a sort of treed embankment behind it, so you can see to a certain extent that the property is kind of screened from the road there. And I think if we just go back to the plan, just notice actually a slight discrepancy in the plans. The house position's shown slightly differently, or it's maybe that's more aligned there. I think the garage position's changed slightly, and it shows you the relation to it. So yes, it's in terms of the overall site area. it has been positioned further into the site. There may well be commentary on that. I think there is that in the review statement that, as far as the applicant is concerned, they have taken cognizance of the location of the context of the site to try and minimise visual impact there. That's the plans that are currently under consideration there. So, and there's the adjoining property, so the view west is towards there. So generally, I think that line more or less shows where the slope starts to increase towards the embankment there. So yes, it's kind of been positioned in a way that pushes it as far back into the site as possible and closer to the embankment as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Do members have any other questions? No. Are we ready to come to a decision?
Yes, after you.
Yeah,
I like to go last. Councillor Majuri, do you want to go first?
Sorry. Yes,
That's okay.
I'm happy to uphold the appeal on balance of evidence provided, and I sympathise more with the grounds for appeal stated on pages 149 to pages 152.
Thank you. Councillor Houston.
Similarly, I would uphold the appeal. I would say this is still getting building on a derelict structure, albeit there's a garage in that without the proposed house next to it. And even if the existing outstanding permission for another house comes through, we're still getting two houses on a site which over several years has been considered suitable for it. And I think the scale and massing of it, where it sits in the topography of the site, I think it contains it well in doing it. So I accept the details of the applicant's agent in making the appeal and would uphold them. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to also agree that I uphold the appeal. I think that the two consents that exist already, it gives me some comfort that one of the sites is going to be brought back into use as a garage. I think the house where it's going to be situated, it's going to be shielded by the trees, and I uphold the reasons for appeal. Sheila.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask members if you're happy to also approve the draft conditions that are set out in pages 325 and 326.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that about appeal. The conditions. It's been a long day. I'm sorry about the conditions. Richard.
Just to confirm the reasons for upholding the appeal in terms of housing in the countryside policy, it needed to be quite clear on if the appeal review or the review rather being supported by members in terms of the housing in the countryside policy, the reasons for that.
There's some more reason given in the appeal statement.
If we could just be specific on that.
Okay, can you give us some guidance on that, please?
Well, really, I've pointed out it doesn't necessarily comply with, it's not a brownfield site. In response to Councillor Houston's query, so it's really just to get the clarification. You're saying there's an existing house there, so if you're satisfied, for example, that a redundant building, and that's the one that already has benefited from the consent, there's a reposition of the house relative to that. You're still getting a development on that general locality. But it doesn't actually fall within any of the housing and site criteria. So it's really
Okay. Can we discuss this outside the public meeting, please? Can we pause the recording just for 5-10 minutes to decide the planning reasons, please?
I'm not
Are
sure
we in
that's
agreement?
appropriate, Chair. It is a public meeting. I don't think it's appropriate to go into private session. All the discussions should really be in public.
Okay, well, I'm asking for planning reasons why we should uphold this appeal. So we need some planning reasons, and none of the councillors are actual planners, so we need some guidance.
One option you would have is to adjourn the meeting, and officers could perhaps come back with some advice rather than actually discussing it with you.
Do that. Are you happy to do that, Councillor Houston, Councillor Majuri?
I'm
Yes,
happy to adjourn. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. We'll adjourn for 10 minutes. We'll come back in 20 past.
20 past.
20
Thank you,
past
Chair.
11.
And we'll stop the recording temporarily. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Can we check? Can we do a roll call, please, just to check the members are present?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Benison?
Yep.
Councillor Houston?
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Majuri?
Present.
That's all members and officers present as before, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to remind members, if they want to speak, if you put your hand up, and if officers can say their name and their titles before they give a response. We're going to go back now to the reasons for upholding the appeal on item number, item number 6, 21000469 FUL. And before the break, the panel had agreed to uphold the appeal. So we're now going to give reasons for upholding that appeal. And the reasons that we have are that there's redevelopment of a redundant building by way of a garage, and the design of the dwelling and the site of the landscape, we regarded it as an appropriate design and in keeping with the countryside. Those valid reasons, Richard and Sheila.
Yeah, thanks. That's fine by me. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. That's relevant.
Thank you. And I think there was also conditions attached. Richard, was there conditions attached to this? Should we approve?
There's draft conditions set out on pages 325 and 326, Chair.
And are the panel happy to agree to the conditions as well? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to agree.
Thank you. Okay, so that's that decision made. We'll now move on to item number 7, and that is land between Craigiebarns and Larne Cottage, Fore Road, Kippen, and it's 21000852 FUL. And I think, Richard, you were going to speak to the report. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. DM Hall, on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Paul Goodwin, seeking review of the delegated decision to refuse planning permission. Reference 21000852 FUL. Change use agricultural land to build a Dwellinghouse and detached garage in the southeast corner of land between Craigiebarns and Larne Cottage, Fore Road, Kippen, and that would be with the remainder of the site left as agricultural use. Refused under delegated powers 18th November 2021. Reference to the agenda papers, application for review and review statements pages 333 to 343. Citizen notice and report of handling pages 344 to 351. Council's reasons for refusal are, in summary, proposal fails to comply with policy 210, housing in the countryside, and supporting supplementary guidance as set out in the development plan. Since the proposal does not constitute a site located within a building cluster or from an infill circumstance and would lead to coalescence. Further, there's been no justification provided indicating a specific locational need for a dwelling house. Site is not considered to be brownfield land, as there is no former buildings in the site and it's not significantly degraded. Second reason for refusal, proposal fails to comply with policy 7.2 relating to conservation areas, since the rural fields are key to framing an important part of the conservation area setting. Development of a dwelling house at this location would remove the rural sense of place at this location. Third reason, the proposal in terms of a design, appearance, position, height, scale and massing is not appropriate to its countryside setting. Application plans and a design statement are pages 352 to 370. Just share a presentation now, which gives a bit more context to this information. Okay, this confirms that come up okay, and the screen members can see the presentation. Yep.
Yes, that's fine.
The application site, as I said, a corner of a sort of larger field on the edge of the village of Kippen, as shown in this plan here. The red is the application site, the blue is application land and the control of the applicant. Just to give a bit of context, an Ordnance Survey map extract that shows a bit more of the village. Application site is down here between property known as Craigiebarns and Larne Cottage. The hatch line is the extent of Kippen as identified in the local development plan, beyond which you enter into the designated countryside. Shown in a bit more detail, beg your pardon. Get an aerial photograph that's included in the agenda papers, just to give a bit more context for it. So again, agricultural land, pasture land in the main surrounding the village of Kippen. Mentions also made of the conservation area, both in the original case of the reason for refusal and in the review statement. This map shows the extent of the conservation, this kind of shaded orange area with the kind of harder orange line round about it. So more or less ties with the village envelope boundary. There's a hatch line, but part of it does extend towards the fields to the west and to the south of the road, and this is to protect the setting of the Shigerton farmhouse conversion. This is also a listed building. More detailed application plan showing the position of the house relative to the field boundaries and the village edge. The house itself, bespoke design, L-shaped appearance, ground floor and upper floor accommodation provided, and some cross sections showing the position of the house relative to the sloping topography of the site, and so the 3D rendition of the house design itself. Some site photographs. These were taken in a previous application for the site, so these photographs were taken by myself, but in relation to a previous site visit. So this is a view looking east along the site frontage as you enter into Kippen, looking west as you leave the village. Boundaries of the, sorry, maybe just go back and forth. This is the property Craigiebarns here. The edge, the boundary defined by hedging and kind of mixture of hedging and trees for the Larne Cottage to the west here. Close-up view of the site showing Craigiebarns, and again showing Larne Cottage just coming into view down here. View looking past as you leave the village, and a view of the site itself looking northeast and northwest. So it's kind of elevated land dropping away from Fore Road. Returning to the presentation, or rather the agenda papers. Consultations from Stirling Council's Archaeological Road Services, pages 371 to 374. Representation from local residents, page 375 to 376. Further observations and recommended planning conditions, pages 377 to 380. Relevant policies. Supplementary guidance for Stirling Local Development Plan, against which the application review requires to be assessed, are Policy 1.1 Site Planning, Policy 2.10 Housing in the Countryside and supporting supplementary guidance. Supplementary guidance includes definitions and interpretations of policy wording relevant to this review. In summary, paragraph 1.5 states development opportunities may at times be close to identified town and village boundaries, i.e. the countryside policy boundary, as shown on the presentation slides. Proposals leading to coalescence with existing settlement will only be supported out with LDP preparation and review process in exceptional circumstances. With reference to this, infill criteria is therefore not relevant to the determination of this review. We also have a case being put forward that in part the proposal complies with the Sustainable Living Scheme, and the requirement is that the planning submission applicant should demonstrate ways in which a sustainable lifestyle will be embraced, and specifically that the intended associated land management activity will be capable of supporting the occupiers as their main source of income, and the proposed house, as well as being suitably located, is designed to have low impact by virtue of scale, construction materials and sources of energy and heating. The development is also affected, or rather affects the setting of the conservation area, so policy 7.2 comes into play as well. Summary of the review statement: the applicant and his family have contributed to the village of Kippen since they moved here in 2005, The applicant has presented proposals to live sustainably in the land and to offer opportunities for the village to use some of it. It's noted that the previous planning applications, 190071 PPP and 190072 PPP, that was at the time when stop sharing this, the subject of a dismissed local review. However, it was a split decision. Consideration is then given to matters raised in the representations. This is one new dwelling and active use of the land. Previous refusal were a close run thing. House will live, enable a local family to become more sustainable and self-sufficient. The applicant is willing for the proposal within the blue line to be controlled via a pre-commencement condition, so there is clarity on this before the dwelling is built. If I may advise the LRB at this point, I do not consider a condition covering that particular matter is appropriate in terms of guidance on whether conditions are suitable or not. The reasons for refusal then addressed in the review statement. An assessment is undertaken on how the development is deemed to comply with infill development criteria set out in housing and countryside guidance. Again, I am the view that that infill criteria does not apply to this particular proposal. With reference to paragraph 1.5, this is recognised in the review statement. Exceptional circumstances are also put forward, i.e. the site is suitable for development, the lack of any impact upon the conservation area, exceptional quality of design, etc. Reference is also made to sustainable living criteria. Though it's confirmed this will not be a main source of income, further efforts can be made to improve the sustainable design of the building, and planning condition will be accepted. Again, I would advise the LRB, in my opinion, that that is not a suitable topic for a planning condition. The remaining land will be planted with an orchard, a coppice woodland, and can be made available for local food growing. Further information is also provided on how the proposal is not deemed to have an impact on the setting of the conservation area. Applicants have requested a site visit because part of the case rests in whether or not an infill plot exists, to assess the impact in the conservation area, to assess the acceptability of the design, and a hearing is also requested. This would allow the applicant to speak directly to councillors on what he intends to do. Thank you. End of presentation.
Thank you. I'll let other members start this time. Is there any questions from members? No? Okay. Richard, I wanted to ask on page 349. Oh, my apologies. I should address the request for the site visit first. So the applicant has requested a site inspection and a hearing. Do members feel that this is necessary?
I don't require a site visit or hearing.
No, Councillor Houston?
No, I don't require a site visit. No.
Okay. They've also requested a hearing. I think we've got enough information here to reach a decision today. Are you in agreement with that?
I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to questions now. Richard, I wanted to ask about on page 349. The applicant has stated that they want to have a small holding and site growing, and this wouldn't be their main source of income, obviously, because of the cost of living standards these days. You wouldn't be able to actually live on a small holding. But it says it's not considered dependent on a countryside location. Can I ask how a small holding is not considered to be dependent on a countryside location? I find that a bit strange that you can have a small holding but not live in the country or rural.
Yeah, just so can you point to the specific paragraph on the report of handling? Is it, I mean, in terms of?
It's on page 349 and it's 5 paragraphs down. It says this, the scale of on-site growing small holding referred to within the planning statement is not considered to be dependent on a countryside location, specifically requiring the development of the site. The applicant recognises that this will not constitute their main source of income. It's my understanding you would need to be dependent on a countryside or rural location to have a small holding and site growing. That's my opinion. So can you tell me how they came to that conclusion, please?
I suppose the point I would make is that to use the land for agricultural purposes or horticultural purposes, I mean, it doesn't even probably require planning permission. You might require planning permission, say, for polytunnels or small-scale polytunnels anyway, but you don't necessarily require the house to support that business. I think that's really, I would read that paragraph and that interpretation at the time of the application and at the time of the review, and it's confirmed with the review that it will not be the main source of income for the applicant. So the sustainable development criteria in housing the country is clearly states that as a sort of a pre-requirement of that criteria, that it has to be a main source of income. So so I suppose it's a scale doesn't necessarily require the development of a house for the site, I suppose, rather than and the applicant is recognised, as it says, that it's not constituting the main source of income. So I think I'd say development in the whole, which is the house and the kind of horticultural element of that. There's no locational need for the house for that scale of development.
Even if they're planning to keep livestock.
Well, I mean, they've said themselves that they will not be the income, will not be the main source of income for the house. So, and again, normally, if that is the justification, we would require a business plan. With that statement having been made, we would, as officers, require a business plan to be submitted to support that. We're just saying it's like an ancillary to the house, but it won't be the main source of income. So there'll be a need for the land simply because that's what they're intending to do, but it's not.
But not the house.
Justification for the house, and that was a view that was expressed by the
council. Okay, thank you. And I wanted to ask, the applicant has stated that this is an infill site, but the officer has came to the conclusion that it's not, and it would coalesce with Kippen. My understanding is that Craigiebarns actually sits on the boundary of Kippen village itself, and the countryside is actually starting exactly where the applicants wants to build their property, and the countryside is Larne Cottage. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The guidance, housing and countryside guidance, and this was part of the previous guidance as well. Although there's various criteria set out in the guidance and the planning policy, it's very specifically stated that development adjacent to the existing villages is deemed to be coalescence. So the criteria set out in the guidance, like things like we've just discussed in the previous cases, the redevelopment of redundant buildings, Blanefield land, do not apply, and equally the infill development criteria doesn't apply as well. The way that should be addressed in terms of further village extension is through the local development plan process, whereby there can be a sort of systematic overview taken of where villages should extend, and as has been the case with the current kind of crop of extensions to settlements that are set out in the local development plan. But any new development immediately adjacent to the boundary should be effectively delayed until such time as it can be assessed through, or the merits that can be assessed through the local development plan review process rather than through kind of ad hoc planning applications, unless there's exceptional circumstances, and the review statement does list exceptional circumstances from the point of view of the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Was there any questions from members? No? Are we ready to go to determination? Yeah, Alistair? Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Sorry, no questions.
Okay, thank you. Are we ready to go to determination? Graham, do you want to go first this time?
Yes. I think I'm minded to reject the appeal. I accept that the argument about whether or not this is an infill site, but I don't think it's the role of a local review body to determine what policy is. I think I've said this before. I think the whole policy of our housing in the countryside is in need of review, given the changes in the way that people live and the way that we're trying to be a greener society and encourage 20-minute communities. And I think this is a good example of it. However, we do have an existing policy. I'm not in favour of using these kind of forums to override existing policy. I think we do need to come back to it as is planned during the course of the next council, and take all these matters into consideration about where the edges of communities are, whether or not that's where the restricted mileage starts or ends, etc. So I think on the basis of, I think the application doesn't meet our existing policy, and for that reason I would not agree to the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Majuri, do you want to go next, please?
Yes, I was going to uphold. I take the. Sorry, I take the points of Councillor Houston's made, but I would agree with the points the applicants made on pages 340 through to page 343. So I would uphold the appeal on that basis.
You're on mute, Maureen.
Oh, apologies. I need a cup of tea. Sorry, Councillor Majuri, you're upholding the appeal.
Yes, for the reasons previously stated.
For the reasons
well, I agree with the applicants.
You agree with the applicants'
on pages 343, 340 to 343.
Thank you. And Councillor Houston found upholding the officer's decision. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm actually going to uphold the officer's decision in this case. There is a clear boundary between where Kippen starts and finishes and where the countryside starts. Larne, Cottage and Craigiebarns, this isn't an infill site, this is agricultural land, and it would be a loss of our agricultural land if we were to approve this application. I think I would agree that it removes the rural sense of place because it's a loss of agricultural land beside the village of Kippen. So I uphold the officer's decision. Sheila?
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to ask if Councillor Majuri would like his dissent recorded.
Yes, if you could record my dissent.
I will do, thank you.
Thank you. So I think we're due a break now because we've been in the meeting for 2 hours and standing order says that we should have a break now. So are we happy to come back at 12:10 for the final item? Is that okay?
How long do we need? Is there a statutory time? 20 minutes feels like a...
Sorry, Councillor Houston, it's a minimum of 10 minutes and at the Chair's discretion up to 30 minutes. So
Could I suggest 15? Let's give me enough time to get a cup of tea.
Yeah, that's fine. Councillor Majuri, is that okay with you? I'm back at 12:05.
Yes, I'll come back at 12:05.
Yes, we'll come back at 12:05. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Broadcast at the moment, thank you.
Thank you. And this is a local review body, and it's we're on the final item. Sorry, can I ask the clerk to do a roll call of members, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Benison.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Houston.
I'm here.
Councillor Majuri.
Present.
That's all members and officers present as before, Chair.
Thank you. And can I remind officers that before they speak to give their name and their job titles before they respond? And can I ask members if they want to speak to put their hand up? We're on the final item of the local review body agenda today, and it's for item 5, land adjacent and south of 5 Manor Steps, Manor Powis. The application number is 21000809 PPP, and I understand Richard is going to speak to this report.
Thanks, Chair. Richard Calendar, Planning Advisor to the local body speaking. DM Hall, on behalf of the applicant, Mr J Logan, are seeking a review of a delegated decision to refuse planning permission. Reference as mentioned, 21000809 PPP. Erection of single dwelling house and garage, land adjacent and south of 5 Manor Steps, Manor Powis, Stirling. Refused other delegated powers on 1st of December 2021. Reference to the agenda papers. Application for review and review statement, pages 387 to 394. Decision notice and report of handling, pages 395 to 400. Council's reasons for refusal are, in the opinion of the Planning Authority, the proposal is not considered to comply with policy 210 of the Stirling Local Development Plan. An SG housing in the countryside as the plot will appear incongruous and the building group will not in a readily identifiable plot where its edge extent is defined by any topographic, natural or landscape stop. Plan application form, application plan, pages 401 to 410. Again, to share a presentation that gives a bit of context for this information so far. Just check members can see that okay for 5 Manor Steps. Is that coming up on the screens?
Yes.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. The application site, it's a PPP application, so the only plan is a location plan. So this is slide number 1. It's a wee bit blurry, I'm afraid, but the plans are also in the agenda papers. Manor Steps are accessed off the old Alloa Road and has been progressively developed over kind of many years. Original farmsteadings here, some of your maybe 1950s properties here. The original farmhouse is here and some holiday chalets here, and this is a area field to the south of that complex which is proposed for development. Proposed access is through the existing shared access road as shown on the plan and the plot. This area down to the south. Just a wee bit more context for members that maybe don't know the area. The main Stirling Alloa roads here, A907. The old road runs parallel to that for a good bit, accesses local properties. And there's a cycle route, and this access, as described previously, comes off that to the south. Manor, sort of Logan and Logie to the north, and right on the Kippen boundary as well. Views look at, again, these photographs date from a previous site visit. Views looking at east across the site, so the basically piece of ground is in the foreground with the open agricultural, obviously very level agricultural land to beyond the application site. If you look at the south from the south site boundary, well, the northern site boundary, rather, looking over the site to the south. Another view looking across the site, so currently pasture land, and as I already said, at a very level. And a view towards kind of 5 Manor Steps, which is the property to the north of the application site. Returning to agenda papers, previous determination of a local review body. It's application reference 200064 and referenced in the review statement, pages 411 to 413. Decision notice on previous application 19Z0215 PPP, and referencing the review statement is pages 415 to 418. Representations from Stirling Council's Roads and Archaeological Services, pages 419 to 423. Representations from neighbouring residents, 424 to 432. Further observation of case officer, 433. Representations received in response to the applications for review, 434 to 438. Proposed conditions, 439 to 440. Applicant's response to further representations, pages 441. Relevant policies and supplementary guidance against which the application for review requires to be assessed, pages 443. That's policy 210, housing in a countryside, and supporting supplementary guidance. This includes definitions and interpretations of policy wording relevant to this review. Of particular relevance are the definition of building groups and clusters, paras 21 to 211 of the guidance. The specific attention drawn to the requirements of paragraph 2.3, which states new dwellings will be required to locate and design so as to respect the established development pattern. Will be seen to be an integral addition to the grouping by locating within readily definable sites. Sites and buildings proposed clearly out with on the edge of a group cluster without an existing well-established topographical, natural or landscape feature which provides a stop and well-defined boundary to the group will not be permitted. Summary of the review statement now. The site has a long planning history with both previous applications referred to in the report of handling having been considered at local review. The latest local review was decided on 21st of March 2021, and the decision was already, as I said, included in the review papers. There's noted no comment on the size of the plot this time round, so we are not sure to what extent the plot could possibly appear incongruous, but rather it is quite in keeping with the existing building group. And the last piece of the jigsaw, which will knit together the existing development to the north and west, and we'll round it off. It should also be noted that access will now be taken from the private road through the building group rather than a new access through the field, thus removing that previous concern raised in the last review. There's been previous contact with the main owner. There is thus a reasonable prospect that access through the building group is possible and can be conditioned via a suspensive condition, which is deemed to be supported by leakables. I would advise the LRB, I don't think a condition would be reasonable in this case. There has to be a reasonable prospect that access can be secured from third-party owners, and with reference to the review submissions we have, at least comments I think from 2 local residents, that it's a shared access and consent is unlikely to be given for the use of that shared access road to access this additional plot. A site visit and a hearing has been requested as end of presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I check with members? As Richard said there, the applicant had requested a site visit, and I think they'd requested a hearing as well. Give me a second.
That's correct.
Yeah. Are we happy to proceed? Do you feel we have enough information to come to a decision today?
Happy to proceed based on.
You're on mute, Councillor.
So I'm happy to proceed based on the information we have today.
Okay, Councillor Houston.
Yes, happy to proceed.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to proceed as well today. I wanted to ask a question, Richard. On page 405, the applicant has, in the assessment of flood risk, the applicant has stated, is the site within an area of no risk of flooding? The applicant has said no, and then it says, do you think your proposal may increase the flood risk elsewhere? And they've said no. But in the representations from neighbours, they have said that this is a flood risk area and it is prone to flooding. Can you give an indication as to why the applicant may have said no to risk of flooding when neighbours have said it is?
So the first port of call to assess sort of general risk to flooding is SEPA's, or Scottish Environment Protection Agency mapping, which identifies areas of medium to high risk of flooding, otherwise known as a kind of 1 to 200 year flood risk area, and where application sites fall within that boundary, depending on the nature of the development. Certainly, as we discussed earlier, a dwelling house is deemed to be a high risk development, then that kind of automatically triggers the need for a flood risk assessment to be carried out. Where but this site is not within that area as identified on SEPA maps, so it tends to indicate there's no reduced risk of flooding. It doesn't necessarily mean there's no risk to flooding at all, but flooding, it takes sort of various forms. The one that gets in the news is called kind of fluvial flooding, where a river bursts its bank, or coastal flooding, where kind of coastal areas are inundated with kind of high surge tides. But here, my reading is it's likely to be a drainage issue, which causes the ground to maybe pond water, maybe intermittently, but not necessarily an identified kind of flood risk issue. So that's why the information provided in the form is correct. But clearly, there's also local knowledge. And SEPA, again, always urge a precautionary approach to be taken. So it might be something that, if the review bodies, it might even be covered by the conditions, the proposed conditions, but certainly further investigation could be carried out in response to the representations raised. But it's not within a statutory identified risk, flood risk area. So that's why that comment can be made in the application form. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I also wanted to ask, the applicant has stated that they might be able to have access to the shared access road, the private track, but there's a number of residents who have stated that they wouldn't be willing to give them access to the track. But the applicant has stated something about, this might be a legal question for you, and the applicant stated something called the Grampian case, the Grampian Council case, where they found that because the applicant doesn't have access to the private track, that's not a reason to turn an application down. Can you tell us how this would sit with this application, please?
The Grampian.
I think that would be.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Okay, thank you.
The Grampian case essentially says applying authority can impose a negative condition. Essentially, you cannot do X unless condition Y is satisfied. For example, you cannot allow occupation of building unless you have secured suitable access. It's often with the there's an issue regarding the traffic movements that be generated by the proposed development, and the access at a junction has to be improved in some way. It's quite a common situation. Essentially, local authority can, if it's thought appropriate, impose a condition saying you cannot allow these buildings to be occupied until such time as you have arranged suitable junction improvements, for example. Whether it's suitable is a question for Richard, but it is legally possible. There may be practical problems for the applicant. They may have to acquire ground to fulfil the condition, to improve the junction. It's not uncommon. I think I've come across at least one application in the last 12 months or so, and similar condition has been employed. And in that case, the applicant had to purchase ground from the council that happened to facilitate road improvements. So it's legally possible. Whether it's advised from a planning point of view is for Richard to say.
Thanks, you. Do you have anything to add to that, Richard?
Just that, I agree with what you're saying, but there's always this proviso that there also has to be a reasonable prospect of consent being obtained from a third party owner to undertake the improvement works or to provide access. Now, there is a bit of legal dubiety. This has been kicked about English and Scottish court cases for decades, to be honest with you. But the current view is that I think this is what's happened here. There's a clear indication that common owners of this access track, which assumes all the properties that benefit from it. At least 2 of them are saying, or one's on record as saying that they will not agree to access being given. They have a legal control over that access. So it's always been viewed as maybe being a bit inappropriate for the council to grant planning permission, knowing that maybe the actual legal position will not be resolved. And you'd rather see it the other way around, like a clear statement comes in support of the application saying we are happy for that exact word, we are agreeable to this access being used, and have reached an appropriate terms with the proposed developer. Something along these lines, you would rather see that come in support of an application rather than put it on as a condition, because then it puts pressure perhaps on householders who have already clearly stated that they don't want access used. So it may be resolvable, but it's not really for the planning service or the council as planning authority to address that issue. It's something for the applicant to come back with in support of the application, or come in the first place with clear indication by a lawyer's solicitor's letter that access will be.
But my concern is that sometimes when conditions are imposed on a planning consent and they can't be complied with, that the applicant goes back to planning panel and asks that this condition is lifted. And I should actually say that it's in the papers here that I did sit on the previous local review body, where the previous application here was turned down because of the access issues. My concern is that this access issue is not resolved, and then should this be consented to, that the applicant comes back and says that they can't meet the condition, so they ask for the condition to be lifted. Is that a possibility that could happen, Richard?
Well, see, the approach to avoid that happening in the first place is you really look for assurance, probably in writing from a solicitor saying that appropriate agreement has been reached between the applicant and the common owners that this access can be used. And potentially there's also scope to maybe agree to improve the access road and fill in potholes. I think that's actually mentioned in the submissions anyway. So there's some benefit to the owners that in agreeing access they'll have a gain as well. But here, the information provided so far, maybe not from every single resident, but certainly it seems to be anyone can veto further use of that access, or even if one resident saying that they don't want that access used to provide access to this development, then that's where the use of this Grampian type conditions is found to be advised against, if not ruled out completely.
Thank you. Councillor Houston.
Yeah, thank you. I must say, when I read this, I discounted access because it's a legal matter between the applicant and the owners of the access. I was more concerned about should there be a building on that site and does it comply? And this is planning in principle. One would imagine that that if we were to agree to this and it went to a full planning application, that would, before they do that, I guess the applicant would have determined whether or not they could get access to the site through any negotiated settlement or whatever it was that caused it. Because I suspect that if they've got, if they do achieve planning in principle, they then have to go into serious negotiations. And if they don't get, if they're not successful in those negotiations and can't get access, on that basis, then it would never come to a full application, is my reading of it. I don't know whether Richard could just confirm that I'm correct in that assumption.
Yes, I mean, the issue, I think it's possibly to do with the planning history, is that the two previous applications were based on a separate access running through the field to the site from the former Rallowa Road. And these have been rejected. So I'm getting the impression from the submission by the applicant and the agent is they just want to they've identified an alternative access, which is the shared access that serves all the other existing houses within the grouping, and just indicate that at least in the initial submission they had been in touch with the main owner, and the main owner did seem to be agreeable to the access being used, but that's now been retracted. If you look at what the submission, page 441, the agent is now referring to Callum Grant, and he refers to a conversation I had with a lady who said she was a main owner. I may be correct, this is a significant influence in that regard, and Callum Grant is saying that there's actually a shared ownership situation down there. So it's changed slightly from the original submission. I think the applicant was given a degree of reassurance that he could, or the site could be accessed via the shared access, but that seems to have been sort of stepped back a wee bit from that initial and based on the comments made in response to the review. But at that point, the issue at the moment is the appropriateness of the site being developed as a plot, and the access as arrangements as a sort of secondary consideration to a certain extent at this stage in time, reflect at least as considered by the case officer and the delegated refusal.
Thank you for that. And could I just confirm that the site plan outlined in red, therefore that access road isn't actually part of the site. The site is more determined from the kind of farmhouse, etc., down to the final site. I'm just wondering where the delineation of what is in the ownership of the applicant, but actually,
well, the application site, the red line site, is kind of commonly referred to, includes the access road, I think primarily to demonstrate there was a means of access to the site. So, but that doesn't necessarily confirm there's a legal right of access over that. I mean, it's just sort of physically been identified as the means of access to the site. And you would certainly want to see that with any application for new housing development, indeed any development. The means of access has been identified as a kind of prerequisite. So that's the arrangement that's now under consideration as part of this.
Right. So do I take it that the land that's actually the ownership of the applicant is in that little box at the bottom, and perhaps delineated by the black line just across it, just down from number 5?
Yes, I have. You maybe refer to the application plan. So, yes, I would say, sorry, if you refer to page 410 of the agenda papers, that's got the application plan.
Yeah.
So there's a sort of angled boundary for the north boundary, and then there's a sort of black line, as it were. So yes, basically kind of not quite rectangular shape, but not far off it.
Yeah.
Where basically Manor steps, is stated, the place name stated.
Yes.
That'll be the site, but the physical development site is as shown by that kind of box here. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? No? Any comments? We're ready to move to determination. Yeah, Councillor Majuri, do you want to go first? Thank you.
Yeah, for decision. Yeah, I wish to uphold the refusal for the reasons given on page 395 by the council.
Thank you. Councillor Houston.
Thank you, Chair. I would uphold the applicant to overturn the decision, and I do so on the basis that's set out that this is there's not a definitive outline to this whole area of housing and holiday chalets, etc. It's a bit sort of piecemeal and set back, and I think the appearance from the road, because it's set so far back the road, will not be any kind of detrimental to it. at all. So I think it meets the criteria. I don't think it challenges the housing in the countryside policy that we have, I think the size of it. I think it would sit in, depending on what the final design might look like. It talks about housing in the countryside. The plot would appear incongruous to the building group. I don't agree with that. I think the building group, as it's set quite far back, I think it actually provides a more kind of natural outline to that small settlement that's there, and sits quite well in the landscape. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm also going to uphold the applicant on this occasion. I think as this is a planning in principle, we don't have any plans of what the dwelling or anything will look like. It's not an infill, it's not a replacement of an existing house, but it is a development within a cluster of housing, and it's defined as being a cluster of housing. I think some of the issues that the neighbours have raised regarding drainage, I think these are issues that SEPA needs to look into. If the neighbours feel that there is flood risks, that is something that SEPA would need to address, and something that the residents would have to raise with SEPA and with Stirling Council. It's not in this panel's remit to decide if it's a flood risk area or not. I think the access issues are something that would need to be dealt with at the full planning stage, and so we uphold the applicant. Can I check if Councillor Majuri would like his dissent recorded? Councillor Majuri, like his dissent recorded. You're on mute just now.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. No, I'm okay for my dissent not to be noted this time. Okay,
thank you. And can I ask if there is conditions attached on pages 414 and 415? Are members happy that these conditions are attached to the planning in principle?
Indeed, yes. Yeah.
Yes, I'm happy. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Is that planning reasons why this can be upheld for the applicant?
Just point out, you mentioned the page numbers there for the draft conditions. They're actually on pages 439 to 440, just to make sure we're looking at the correct pages.
Oh, my apologies. I'm sorry. 439 to 440. Yes, it's my mistake.
That's noted. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks for pointing that out, Sheila. It's really appreciated. It's been a long day. So are we content with the reasons and the conditions?
You've considered the proposal against the appropriate criteria in the housing and countryside guidance and come to the conclusion you've reached. So yeah, you've taken into account the development plan considerations and coming to the conclusion on the review. So I would say that's sufficient. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for your time today. This meeting's now closed. Thank you.
Thank you.